Well, hello out there, all my fellow veterans and your families and America, actually. I want to thank you all for tuning in today. Sorry about yesterday. I miscalculated how much traveling I was going to be doing, and I kind of messed it up. So, apologize. I apologize for that. But here we are tonight. And hey, for those of you who listened to me about that filing your travel pay claims through the VA, I hope you got them in. So now it goes back to only being allowed to go back 30 days instead of 2 years. So I hope you got those in. But let's go ahead and get this show on the road, shall we? If my clicker will work. There we go. All right. All right. I am Tim Hauser. I am the Gulf War Advocate, and this is Veteran Central. And today I have my very good friend and a very, very important guest on today, Mr. Dave Crete. Mr. Crete is going to tell us what is happening to many veterans that were stationed out in Nevada and why they can't get health care through the VA. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thank you, Tim. When you said somebody very important, I thought somebody else was joining us.
Oh,
But thank you for
you're
having
the
me.
man. It's an honor to have you on. So, if you could tell us a little bit about your military background first, and then we'll move on from there.
So I enlisted in the Air Force my senior year of high school. Went off to basic training in July of '83. Signed up for 6 years, so I got that instant airman first class when I got out of basic, and I became security police, which is now security forces. And back when I joined, there was two types of security police. One was the guys that worked the gates, and the other was the guys that lived on the flight line. And I was the flight line kind. And while we were going through training, there was a notice that there was a special duty assignment coming out. And I had orders to go to the nuclear storage area at Nellis Air Force Base. And they told us that you were going to live in Vegas for 4 years. It was a controlled tour. And so I said I wasn't interested because I was one of those that put on my dream sheet, all the places I'd like to go, Aviano Air Base and all these super cool places. And then I put anywhere overseas. I didn't care. Send me to Korea, send me to Iceland. I don't care. I want to go see somewhere. And I was from Phoenix, which is obviously the desert. And then Las Vegas I'm going 300 miles to go live in another desert. So it wasn't the most appealing thing. So I told this captain that was dressed up in civilian clothes, and I said, "No, sir, I'm not interested." Well, I think he didn't hear me right. And a few weeks later, I get an amendment to my orders, and we start this process to go to Las Vegas to an assignment that there was a few other guys in the tech school class with me, and none of us had any idea what we were doing. They wouldn't tell us anything. They literally said, "You'll live in Vegas for 4 years. That's all we can tell you." And then they said, "You're going to have to get a top secret security clearance. You're going to have to fill out a bunch of paperwork." And we went through that process and then went off, took some other training stuff. One thing was called ABGD, and it's like how to become how to learn how to be a guy in the Army at an Army base, even though you're an Air Force cop. So got through all that, got home. It was about Christmas time, spent a couple weeks at home, and I go up to Nellis and I sign in, and all they tell me on my orders was to report to this one building. And I get there and it looks like a storage shed more than it does anything else. There's no windows. It's a block building. There's a door. So I go in the door, and in there sat this tech sergeant, and I'm like, this is me. I've got these orders. I have no idea what I'm doing, except I'm told I'm supposed to be here. And so signed in, and then he says, "You're going to go over to temporary living quarters. You're going to get a room. And since it was in between Christmas and New Year's, we'll see you next week." Well, that's easy. And everything at that point kind of seemed strange because it was, hi, how are you? Sign here, see you, bye. And, I'm brand new and we don't know
Yeah.
what to expect. And that was definitely not what I expected. I thought I was going to like show up and go to work or something, and not the case. So we go through that, we get our clearances, and they brief us in, to some level. They forgot a pretty shocking detail when they briefed us in, and that was we were going to work out on the Nellis Test and Training Range at a base that was at Tonopah Test Range. The base at the time was classified top secret, and they tell us when to show up, and we get on a civilian 727 and we fly to work. And the thing that they forgot to tell us is that when we landed, don't be shocked when you realize that as you're landing and you look out over at the flight line, it's going to be all Russian MiGs. And there was a lot of Russian MiGs all lined up, MiG-21s and MiG-23s. And we were fairly certain we had landed at a U.S. Air Force base, but we were a little bit confused. So we get through it, and we get in and we land. We get our badges, we get our sidearm, we get our M16, and then we get taken to a hangar. And literally, there's a pilot there, and he sits us down in the cockpit of an F-117 and explains everything to us. And we thought we were just the coolest kids in town, because that was a pretty different experience. I was just about 19 years old, and here I am in the middle of nowhere that nobody knows is theirs, looking at things nobody knows exists. And it was a very, very small unit when I got there, because they had just started delivering the jets about a year before. And we, like everybody else, we spent 4 years up there, and it was an absolutely unbelievable experience, for a young guy to get to do things and see things that nobody else gets to do or see. So I blew my knee on an exercise. I went down, got a desk job at Main Base Nellis, finished out my 6 years. I did about a year and a half at the Fighter Weapons School. And I got out and kind of lost track of everybody that I was in with. Then fast forward from 1989 to about 2015, spring of 2015, I get a Facebook message from somebody and asks, hey, is this Cujo? And that was my nickname when I was in the service. It's still my nickname to this day. But I get, yeah, this is me. And I realize who it is. It was a guy in my wife and I's wedding. So, I respond to him. We start talking. He goes, hey, there's a Facebook page for us, and you need to join it, be a member, and we're having reunions and doing things. Too bad you just missed one a few months ago, but we're trying to plan another one. So that gets us to the point where now all of a sudden we're having a reunion. It happens to be at my house here in Las Vegas. I still live here. Left for a while, but I came back in 2001. And then we go out to Nellis Air Force Base, where they have one of the stealth fighters out at the parade grounds on display. We went out there and we take our picture as a group. And it was really pretty interesting, because all these guys are at my house that I haven't seen since 1987. And it was a good time. But one of the things that was interesting, on the first day dinner was at my house, and we were getting ready to start cooking dinner. But some of the guys were early, and we're sitting back there, we're having a beer and we're talking. One of the guys mentions that he had a pain in his back, and I asked him what it was, and he's like, oh, I got this lump. So I'm like, oh, do tell. What do you mean? And he tells me what's going on. And I said, I had one of those. I had it taken out. I had a tumor. It was the size of a grapefruit. And it was causing too much discomfort, because it had wedged itself between my rib cage and my shoulder blade. I said, so I had it out. And he shows me where his is, and it's the exact same spot. At that time, including myself, there was 8 of us in my backyard. 6 of us had tumors.
Oh, man.
That started the process of something here is not right. So as we move forward and we start talking, we start finding out there's a lot of commonalities between one another and health problems. And the commonalities were maybe we have the same conditions, or it was surprising too, all of us had something. And maybe it was a couple of different things. Like, I've got bad lungs, which I just attributed to having bad lungs. And through these conversations, I start researching, well, what we can assume the nexus, because we used to joke about it, that was working at Tonopah Test Range, because we were directly north of where they used to do all the nuclear testing at the Nevada test site. And we all, you believe there's a nexus, but there's the things that there's the things you believe, things you know, and things you can prove. And I started going down that, and that ended up being between a 7 and 8 year project. And everything I was finding out was bad. And as we went through, I started telling the guys, I said, I've been doing this research. I didn't tell anybody much because first off, I didn't want to sound like a lunatic, and I didn't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist.
Right.
And some of this stuff was hard for me to believe. And finally last year, I told everybody, I said, I'm putting together a PowerPoint. You guys can believe me, don't believe me. Because we were having another reunion Veterans Day at my house, and there was about 35 guys that came in town. And we're sitting around, of course, having something to drink, eating food, and talking. And they're a great time because it's everybody that showed up like me as an 18-year-old E3 all the way to our unit commander. So it's a pretty diverse, pretty neat group of people. And I told them, I said, believe me, don't believe me, but y'all need to hear this stuff. So then this spring I did a presentation to them, and I'd sent a couple of my buddies that Randy Groves and Mark Pettis, and I sent them. I said, guys, here's just one thing. I want you to read it. I want you to tell me what you think. And they flipped out. And then we sent it over to our colonel, and I sent it over to him, and he calls me back, and he's like, I'm going to sit on this for a few days. This is wrong. And I had sent him information about one of the nuclear tests that took place right next to where we sleep. And when we went up, we stayed up there for the week. We were up there usually 4 days, sometimes as often as 10 days. We would stay up there, and that means we didn't come home. That was our duty station for the week, and then we'd fly back to Vegas, and that would be our weekend, whatever our days off were at the time. We'd fly back. And the opposite shift would fly up, and then they had security for that time. But I went through it, and we did a couple of Zooms, and I created like a 60-page slide deck for everybody to go through and to look at. And everything that I supplied was government documents and cleanup reports and different things. And I said, guys, this is all wrong. And I started showing them all the diseases that were being caused. And then I showed them where the Department of Energy employees and contractors had all previously been compensated and financially and lifetime medical. And there was an acknowledgement that, hey, this is what's out there and this is what it's causing. And by the way, all the soil that was out there is contaminated. All the water you drank was contaminated. All your food was cooked in water that was contaminated. There's all kinds of problems, right down to the government saying, hey, there's plutonium there and it's contaminated. So that's kind of what brought us to here. And now this has exploded. You're helping.
Yes.
And thank you for that, because it's turning into being a really big deal. It has absolutely flipped my life upside down, especially since April 11th. That's when we put out that press release. Everything in life has changed.
Yes, I can understand that. What I went through because of burn pits and oil well fires, it's like 10 times more for you guys. Now,
and our challenge is, like with PACT, what you worked on, which is it's great stuff. But for us, our challenge is the fact that they will not. Our records from when we were stationed in Vegas are still data masked. There's nothing there. We've requested them. We've got them. And this goes from, for everybody, the officers and the enlisted alike. And we found out that they destroyed a bunch of the records. Instead of transferring them somewhere, they literally destroyed them up there and took them to the burn pit.
Oh, man.
And so the challenge, this is kind of the jump to the end. Why is this so difficult for us? Is everybody talks about Area 51. That's the saucy, juicy stuff. And to put it in context, there's 2 bases out there. Everybody calls it Area 51, but there's 2 bases. And if they acknowledge that we were there and that we were contaminated, then they have to admit that they're still doing this to people, because they're still sending people there every day. There's still people flying up.
Mhm.
There's still people that drive up to work. And if they admit us, they have to admit them.
Yes.
And we have paperwork going back to before my base was ever built that the government acknowledged the contamination. They knew before they sent us there, and they literally did. If you remember, you're probably just about as old as I am.
Yes.
Ford had done an analysis when they made the Pinto. They discovered the Pinto is going to blow up if you rear end it.
Yes. Mhm.
But they did an analysis that says we're going to make more money off this car than we risk losing in liabilities in case of the rear end collision that happens just the right way and the car blows up and the occupants die. So they did the exact same analysis. They said, look, it's contaminated, and it's contaminated with things like it's plutonium-239, uranium-238, depleted uranium, spent rocket fuel motors, beryllium, benzene, hydrazine. I mean, the list, it goes on and on and on that we have. And there's things that are classified that we can't discuss, but everything's bad. There's nothing out there that goes, yeah, it's kind of marginal. It's all bad. And they won't admit to it. So for our guys, when we go down, like I did the PACT Act interview yesterday for the exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy goes, you weren't exposed because your location isn't on the list. I said, I know that, but this is a step I have to go through. All of our guys are getting denied benefits. And we have guys dying all the time. One of the units estimates that 60% of the guys, I'm 58, 60% of the guys that were up there during the 80s have already passed.
Yeah, that's that number's
number.
Astronomical.
Yeah, and we weren't a big place. Neither location is a big place. One has been around longer than the other, but we shouldn't be looking at these kind of numbers. And it's like one of our guys that was a cop, Ashley Drollinger. Last November, he was posting all over Facebook. He added a new porch onto his house. Everything's good. Super fit, healthy guy. And in February 24th, he passed away from a brain tumor. He got a melanoma on his face. It went in, got to his brain, created a brain tumor, and there's a name for it, but it's a super aggressive brain tumor. And he went from perfectly healthy to dead in 3 months. And it's happening. You see, we have that private Facebook page,
Mm-hmm.
and lately it seems like it's at least every week we're adding a name to it.
Right.
You know, the other day I got a list of 30 names of guys that have recently passed away.
Man.
So it's nonstop.
See, now you mentioned one common link between from Desert Storm to present Afghan Iraqi veterans to you folks. Benzene. It seems every single veteran in this country has benzene in their system. But yet the government still tries to gaslight us and say, no, everything's fine with you guys. Now, if you could, can you explain what data masking is for our folks?
Yeah, so data masking, like I said before, we all had top secret security clearances. You couldn't get there without one. And the base was top secret. And so when we went up there, we were non-existent people. And in that, we got paid, but there was a classification even on our payroll where we were kind of singled out. And so we didn't have records. We didn't associate with people. Like I didn't go talk and hang out with people that weren't cops. It was a very, very strange life. And then when we left, those records were still data masked, and that means they're still classified. When they pull our personnel files, like when I was at the VA a couple months ago, and they were trying to pull my file on stuff, my medical file, it's blank. Mark Penicus, whom you know,
yep.
He finally got his medical records from, I don't remember the name of the bureau, but there's a place that keeps all that stuff, right? And his medical record shows his entrance exam and one dental appointment in his 6 years in the Air Force. There's nothing else. And he got medevac from the range down to Nellis Hospital twice.
Yeah.
There's no record of him being in the hospital ever.
That just
If like
blows my
today,
mind that the DOD.
today, if you were to look at my
Mhm.
records, it doesn't even say I was at Nellis when I was uprange. It's not like we were at Nellis. Our old building, it was called the Ghost House because nobody that went in that building existed. So that was the nickname. It was the Ghost House. You would think that, well, maybe it was this, we were all assigned to this little building in the back corner of the base. And that wasn't the case. We weren't assigned to that building. We weren't assigned to anywhere. So when I went through the toxic exposure screening yesterday, the guy goes, "No, you have no exposure because your place wasn't on the list." Because I told him, I said, "I was at Tonopah Test Range, which has now been acknowledged, just like Groom Lake has been
Yep.
acknowledged." People don't know what goes on there. A lot of people like to guess, and as somebody who was up there, I never seen the little green people, but that's that's the mythical existence up there. But it was cool stuff. It was a cool job. It was what it was, but we weren't there because the DOD officially says there is no military on the range. It's just the Department of Energy program.
Now, you stated too that there were civilians that were out there.
Correct.
And did you state that they are being taken care of?
Yeah, so there's a bill called EOIPA, EEOICPA. Type it in, it comes up. It's a big acronym. It's got a whole lot of words. That bill passed in 2000. And when it passed, there was an executive order signed by President Clinton that specifically stated and limited that there are benefits available. And they make it sound like there's benefits for everybody, but it's limited to Department of Energy employees and Department of Energy contractors. And the thing people don't realize is I was Department of Defense, obviously. I'm a GI.
Mm-hmm.
The guys building the hangars, like when I got up there, I think we had something like 9 hangars. When I left, we had about 50 hangars, something like that. And the guys building the hangars all worked for Department of Energy.
Yeah.
They were all Department of Energy contractors. Even though as cops, we had to let them go into an area and make sure they were out of an area when the time came. Because like the Stealth, the entire time I worked up there, it never flew during the day. I never saw the aircraft fly during the day until I was a civilian at an air show and one did a flyby. It didn't happen. So the contractors would be out there during the day, and then they'd get them all out of there before sunset when things really kicked off, because everybody worked at night except pretty much few mechanics, fire department, and cops. We were the ones that were there around the clock. But yeah, they've all been taken care of. If they have been on the range for 250 days, whether they stayed the nights out there or not, if they're out there 250 days, they get $150,000. And then if they have medical issues, it goes up to $400,000, and they get a white card. And the white card is like Blue Cross and Blue Shield supplied by the U.S. government. It's a U.S. government insurance card, and they can go to any doctor and they get taken care of. And it's all part of their compensation package, if you will. And to give you an idea in size, and now it's not just DOE on Nellis Test and Training Range. It's the DOE that had anything to do with any of the nuclear program anywhere in the country. But they have paid claims to over 130,000 people, and to a tune of $23 billion, over $23 billion. As far as when I say paid claims, whether it was monetary compensation or it's medical bills that they paid for everybody. And the thing that makes ours, and it's for these folks too, and there's a certain class of people that even on the DOE side hasn't been taken care of, and we're trying to address that too. And that is, my wife was one of them. The wives were all having miscarriage. My wife had 3 miscarriages. And we found out it's a direct connection as to why, because of what happens. Many of us have kids that were born with birth defects and significant health issues. And the rate of birth defects is unbelievable. Our rate of spina bifida, it's only anecdotal. It's based on the folks that we've talked to, but we're hundreds of times higher than the rate of the general public. Mm-hmm. Our tumor rate that I was talking about at the beginning, yes, like these things that we have, and the one I had on my back, that type of tumor has an occurrence in the general population of 1 per 1,000 people. our best guess is we're about 4,000% above the normal rate of occurrence.
Yeah, I looked into that too, and yeah,
we're not
way
even
above
close.
National number.
Yeah,
So.
it blows all those stats out of the water, and they're like, it's just coincidence.
Mhm.
I don't know, because you were never exposed, so it couldn't have been that. And so our fight now is to make them acknowledge that where we were, that we were exposed, that guys should be entitled to benefits. The argument is basically we're no lesser a person than a Department of Energy employee. We're not second class to anyone. We're not saying we're better, but we're not second class to anyone. We went out there, we did our jobs, we did an amazing job. Our things we accomplished are amazing. It's truly amazing. But they knew before they sent us there what they were going to do. And so now we have the guys are sick, more are sick than aren't. A huge number of us have already passed away, which shouldn't be happening.
Right.
And they've been dying for 30 years.
Mhm.
So it's not like they all died last week. Even of our wing commanders that were uprange, there was 7. One got there at the very end, and he went to New Mexico. But there were 6 wing commanders while we were up there that took care of the meat of the time. 4 of the 6 wing commanders have died, cancer. So there's no bias on rank. In the beginning, when I told a few guys, they were like, "Oh man, the officers did this to us." No, it wasn't the officers; they're dying too.
Yep.
The pilots. I've heard a couple of the pilots say that we just called it a pilot's disease. That's why all the pilots were sick, because they didn't realize. So was their crew chiefs. So were the cops. So were the firemen.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how this has taken off. I went to Congressman Amodei, whom you know,
Yes.
and said, I talked to him for about 20 minutes. The attorney that's working with us got a hold of him, and I talked to him for about 20 minutes, and he was like, "Yeah, I got a plan. We're going to call all these people in and blah, blah, blah. We're going to fix this." And I'm sitting there the whole time going, "That's not going to work." So I had a conversation with him a few days later. I gave him the slide deck that you've seen.
Yep.
The presentation, and he says, "Well, that was on a Friday," and he goes, "Well, I'll look at it over the weekend, and let's talk again Monday." So he calls me up on Monday, and we have a conversation for a little bit, and he goes, "My plan isn't going to work, is it?" "No, sir, it's not." And you're being respectful. I mean, he's a congressman,
Mhm.
and I'm like, "No, sir, no, we're not getting there from here." And then it chimed in, it finally rang a bell, because he's not briefed into the range. Because I asked him straight up, "Have you been read in?" And he goes, "No." And I said, "All right," because it tells me more of what he understands and doesn't understand, and kind of what, to be careful. He hasn't been briefed in. And so, but then the alarm bells for him went off, and he goes, "So you're telling me the government's known this forever? They're not doing anything for you guys, and worse is they're still sending guys there."
Yep.
Yes, sir. That's exactly what's going on.
And what's even worse is they're taking
prior Army. Say again.
And what's even worse is the government's taking care of the civilians that worked out there.
Yeah, and so at that point he lost his mind, and he was using some pretty colorful language, and he's like,
he's known for colorful language, that's for sure.
And I said, "Well, sir," I said, "we need a BDR. We need a bill draft request to go in, and we need to write a law. We need a standalone law, because there's so many little unique things that the first thing they have to do is they have to acknowledge that we were there, which they're not going to like to do.
Right.
And in some cases, we know that the government's going to have problems acknowledging people because they don't even have full records." So I went through it with him, and he goes, "All right, so you need to be," he goes, No, stop." He goes, "You've got that." And he was on recess. He goes, "You've got that. Get past that step. What else do you need?" And I'm like, "What do you mean we have that?" He goes, "When we hang up, I'm doing it myself." He goes, "I will get a whole legislative council. I will put in your BDR, and they will get started today. And I'll call you back to confirm." And you know how it works.
Yep.
You've been doing this a long time.
Yes.
That's a little bit of a unique situation where in 1 hour's time, I've got my bill, and I was hoping to have that in draft uh, by the end of the year, and now we're working on our second draft.
Yep.
So we're getting somewhere, which is outstanding.
And another thing too is not only him, but we've talked to several senators and congressmen already
Yeah.
to help build up support for this bill,
And they're all equally as
prior
shocked.
to it being finished. Yes.
Yeah. And they're all equally as shocked when you tell them, yeah, the civilians have been taken care of, but the military, they deny us because they deny our existence. They deny the fact that we were ever out there, and we had even our chief, our chief master sergeant for our unit, he passed away last year, spring of last year. He had cancer twice. Then 2 times it went into remission, and then he got one of those brain tumors that's so aggressive, and he died quickly, and within months.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really sad. Our commanders had cancer twice. One of the guys that serves on my board of directors for the Invisible Enemy, he currently has cancer of the colon, cancer of the bladder, and thyroid cancer right now.
Yeah.
And the government says none of those are service connected.
All of them are service connected. We know that. They know that.
Yeah. Yeah, knowing and admitting.
Mm-hmm.
We have to help walk them across that bridge where they admit it. None of us are trying to say, we need you to shut down this location. You need to shut down that location. No. You chose to send people there. What you choose to do in the future, you choose to do. I mean, we could make recommendations on what they should do, but you can't deny people because you realize you made a big mistake and you poisoned thousands of guys knowingly.
Yeah.
And it's not speculation. I think I've sent you one of the documents. It says right on there that this is what we're doing. Because in one of the documents, in the conclusion, it says we've got 3 choices. We can shut it down because of the contamination. We can allow just limited, restricted use of the range. Or 3, we just go about our business and do what we do. And their analysis was that the benefit to national security outweighs any future liabilities due to the environmental hazards.
Mm-mm-mm.
And they put it in writing. This is on Washington, D.C. letterhead from a government agency that says this is our decision. And that was in 1975. 1979, they started the process of building the base where we went.
So they knew even prior to building anything out there.
Yeah. Prior to Red Eagle showing up, prior to the 4450th showing up, prior to one F-117 showing up, they knew it was contaminated.
Now,
like I say, the other base is older than we are, and that place is a mess.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big secret how close we are to different events, because you go to Google Maps, I can show you the bases. We're right there, and then you can look at where the craters are, and then you look at, like, for all the testing that they were doing from the 50s through 92, the way that they quote unquote protected Vegas, and that's another challenge that they're having now because of some congressman and senator over in Arizona. They said that they protected Vegas from any type of contamination because they made sure the wind was coming out of the south or southeast. Well, the wind coming out of the southeast and blowing across the Nevada test site, NTS, which is part of NTTR, all these acronyms, right? Blows directly to the Tonopah Test Range base.
Yes.
And it's like we have mountains. All the predominant terrain features are mountain ranges that run north-south. To the south is where they blew up over 1,000 nuclear warheads. And it channels it right down to where our base was, coming right up the valley that we were located in. So they protected them, or protected Vegas, which is arguable if you read the old press releases and things, but they made sure that it was going to blow north, and that's where we were. And when you look at, there's a thing called Sedan Crater. You can go in and Google Sedan Crater. It's the largest man-made crater in the world.
Yes.
It displaced It was a shallow test, and the idea behind the test tells you how crazy some of these scientists were, and truly like trying to be innovative, but bad ideas. Sedan crater was a 104 kiloton nuclear warhead buried 600 feet below the ground surface. It vented because it displaced 12 million tons of dirt, creating a hole that has a 1,280-foot diameter, 200 feet deep.
Yes.
It's 12 miles from Groom Lake. And that's the largest crater in the world outside meteoric type craters, right? Man-made craters. It's the largest one in the world. And the base is right next to it. And I have people that I've talked to, firsthand stories, where they said down there back when they were doing those tests that you could watch the ramp, the concrete and the ramp and the runways, it was like it would roll like slow waves going across.
Oh man.
From the explosions. It's just insane. And they're like, "Oh, just go stand outside a building. You're fine."
Now, not only with some of the research that I've done, not only does this contamination affect you folks, but prior to them even deciding to build the bases out there, they knew a lot of the ground was contaminated, so they were trying to clean it up, and they took a lot of that, put it in barrels, and I found documentation where they buried it at George Air Force Base in California.
Yeah, I've talked to people that are out at our sister base, and they said some of those barrels have been sitting there forever,
Yes.
and everybody knew just to stay away from them. So the EPA says, "Hey, you got to clean this up." And so I've heard the stories and read the stories where they took those. Yeah, we're going to clean it up. So they just trucked it to George.
Yes.
And then contaminated George.
Yep. I was stationed there for 8 years.
Yeah. And then there's things that I've read that the EPA kind of says, well, there's so much, it's so bad. We're just going to waive the requirements of maintaining EPA safety levels out there. Awesome. You know, there's a aquifer, and we live in the driest desert. Mojave Desert's the driest desert in North America. Yes. And we have huge aquifers here. And we have Lake Mead, the Colorado River. And Lake Mead looks horrible. It's very low.
Yep.
And there's an aquifer that sits under NTS, which is near where our drinking water came from. It's near where Pahrump is. And the aquifer, they said, is the equivalent to 16 years of Nevada's allotment out of Lake Mead. 16 years worth of water.
Yes.
And in some areas, it is so contaminated that the EPA standard for what's considered potable, drinkable water, it's 1 million times higher. So these tests contaminated Nevada's water that would give us 16 years supply, which would be great to augment. It's 50 miles, 75 miles from Vegas, and would augment our water, and we can't use it because they contaminated all of it. Yeah, and so it's really kind of piss poor planning on their part.
Yes.
And poor management. And then the way that they've addressed it is they stick their head in the sand. And you know, they had, if you read the stories, when they were doing the above ground testing back in the 50s and 60s, they used to send the Army out there.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to see the survivability and how things would impact. And their thought was maybe we can convince the soldiers, the infantrymen, that a nuclear blast is survivable. Just stay down, duck down in your foxhole, you'll be fine. Most of those guys always died.
Yeah.
So they come out a few years ago with that civilian bill and they say, hey, you know what? We took care of the military guys that were out there for those tests. Well, the youngest guy when they did that was absolutely in their 70s and probably in their 80s. Most of them had already passed.
Yes.
But the government comes out and says, hey, we took care of them. And so part of my argument with all of this, as we're dealing with this and we're dealing with the legislation, is this. So somebody wants to kill somebody, and so they start to poison you, and they do one of those slow poisons, right? So it's not so obvious. You're not, here, drink this, and you're done. So they poison you over a period of time. Are you sick when you've been poisoned, or are you sick when it manifests itself? You
Mm-hmm.
know, if I drank a cup of bleach, but it takes a month to kill me, am I sick? Am I poisoned at the time I drank the bleach, or at the time it manifests itself?
Yeah.
And that's my argument with the
Mm-hmm.
military. We're not the manifestation of the issues is a result of being poisoned.
Yep.
So don't wait till everybody's dead to say, "Hey, we're going to do something for you now." And in like Ashley Drollinger's case, it was 3 months. You're not getting anywhere with the VA when if they stand up and say, "Hey, yeah, I was there," and the military acknowledges it, then you go to file for a benefit, you're dead. And I'm not trying to be callous. It's the world we live in.
Yes.
That's what all of us guys are dealing with.
Yep.
You know,
I'm
what are you going to do for the kids?
I'm hoping the folks from George Air Force Base are watching, or at least watch this later on, because some of the stuff that Dave's talking about, you folks need to use.
Well, I hope they contact
Yeah,
me.
I hope so too. I've been trying to talk to them about this and trying to say, hey, this is the way I think you guys should go with this. So I hope they're listening, because everything that Dave's saying can benefit you guys as well.
Yeah. I know what they sent down there.
Mm-hmm.
I know what they've done, and I don't regret my assignment. I don't regret my time in the military at all.
Neither do I.
All those experiences make me who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I'm proud of what I did.
Yep.
I'm not proud of the government sticking their head in the sand and not addressing the issues.
Now, when you said they took care of the military guys when they were doing the above ground testing 70 years later, look what they did with the Vietnam veterans.
Oh, yeah.
It took until the PACT Act for them to finally say, hey, look, yeah, we had troops in Laos. Yeah, we had troops in Guam. Yeah, we had troops in Thailand. They're affected too. Let's help them now. 90% of them are already dead.
Yeah. And at best sick.
Yes. Yep.
Here, if you don't mind, I'll tell you, like, for the guys that were, when they sent the Army out to NTS to watch the tests, one of the tests that the government did is they took the best I could say it, because I'm an Air Force guy, is it was like a couple squadrons of troops and their trucks and their equipment and their tents and everything else, and they have them set up and they trench, so they create defensive positions and everything out there. They dropped a nuke and exploded at 20,000 feet over their head. So it was an above ground burst. I think it was from a balloon is what they dropped it from.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To see how the explosion is right there. Let's see how our guys fare.
Yeah.
Most of them didn't make it out of there.
Right.
All of them ended up sick. All of them ended up with radiation sickness, radiation burns. That was the best case.
Yeah.
And the government, oh, that's too bad. Yeah, it's too bad. It's a whole lot worse than too bad.
Yeah, they seem to have liked to use the term, well, you signed the dotted line for centuries. So
you went and served in a war. And we all understand that we all signed up to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And we understand when we go do that, there's certain risks. When there's a ramification to those risks, it needs to be addressed. And for us, the way we look at it, though, is we're sitting out in the Nevada desert. They tell us they're fine. I had to sign a disclosure when I got up there to advise me of what the hazards were in the area. And the hazards that we had to sign was that there's ice in the winter because it gets pretty cold, and there's wild horses on the range. Don't hit them.
Oh, man.
That's all that we had to sign for. And they knew there's things that happen like to you and to the other guys. But we really didn't expect that just working in Nevada that the government was knowingly going to make a science experiment out of us.
Right.
Yeah. You don't. It doesn't make sense. We all understand why they picked the location. It's the most sparsely populated area in the United
Mhm.
States. There are people that live out there, but it doesn't make it okay to send people out there and cook their food in the water that's contaminated and have them shower in the contamination and then work in it. The OD Green t-shirts you wear under your
Uh-huh.
fatigues. I don't know if you've heard the stories, but we used to all joke when we would go out and practice doing what we do, hold exercises out in the desert.
Mhm.
All of our t-shirts up here, where every place that was exposed turned purple.
Oh, man. I didn't hear that.
Literally. Yeah. All of our t-shirts turned purple, and we used to joke about it. And they told us, somebody one time told me it's from your sweat. When we were in Lackland,
Yeah,
we sweated.
oh, yeah.
We went to Lackland in July. You sweat.
Mhm.
I didn't get purple t-shirts. And all of ours t-shirts would turn purple. That's why we'd have to get rid of them and replace them, because now you're out of 3510 because nowhere in the regs to say you can wear a purple t-shirt.
Right. Exactly. And
So
now to verify your story about the birth defects and everything, I went to Desert Storm after my troops went. My troops went to Bahrain. I got sent to Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, be part of the Joint Force unit there. And when I came back, a lot of my troops and a lot of the people that went to Desert Storm were having babies when I came back. And I think it was like 100% of all the births on that base had birth defects or some sort of major medical problems. So I can only imagine what it is for your group.
Well, there's a guy who's part of our group who's on the Facebook page that you're on, who was a civilian aircraft mechanic at our sister base. He went up in 1980. 1985, his wife had a baby. 4 months early, 1 pound 3 ounces.
Mm.
She lived 19 days.
Just not all right.
Nope. He has another one. That baby survived, born 2 months early at 3 pounds. His wife ended up getting sick because we'd bring our dirty laundry home. So all the dust, the ionizing radiation, the alpha particles that was on all the dust and the dirt that we'd bring home in our A3 bags and our travel bags. A lot of the wives have got cancer and been ill because of it, end up with silicosis and stuff. His wife, after losing a kid and going through all that 5 years ago, finally she committed suicide.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
No, it's not. Nope. And it's time for the
No.
government to quit gaslighting us.
Yeah.
They knew what they knew the risks.
Well, I've got it in writing. They knew.
Yep.
I mean, somebody asked, because I get articles all the time, and you can read stuff like some of the stuff on the contaminated water. LA Times was running articles on that. People have run articles. Popular Mechanics has run articles. All this stuff, and people have asked me, why don't you include some of that data, some of that information in your presentations? The government, that's pretty easy for the government to refute. They can just say they're wrong.
Yeah.
But when you supply them their own documentation,
They can't deny it.
is it wrong?
Yeah.
They all made mistakes back then. And the other thing that you'll see in Department of Energy documents is the old documents say one thing. And then as we go forward and, closer to today, all of a sudden the tests that took place were a little more mild and had a little less effect, to the point where you can see there's one test that took place that was in between our work area and sleep area at Tonopah. That was a monster test, 300 kiloton nuclear blast, to a document that says it was a pipe dream. They really wanted to do it. They just never got around to it.
Man.
What the problem that they have in that statement is, I have the cleanup records where they tried to do some remediation to it. In the other documents, it says that they did it in Area 3 at the Nevada test site. Well, there's an Area 3 at Tonopah as well. And they said, no, it was at Area 3 at Tonopah. So it's kind of like saying we spilt a glass of milk in the kitchen, so we mopped the living room floor.
Right.
typically people clean where they make a mess.
Yeah.
So they changed all the other records except that one. So if you didn't do it there, why did you clean there? This is Department of Energy document that literally pinpoints on a map going, it's right here.
Now, I can't remember if it was you or one of the other guys. Did some of you all get toxicity testing done on your own?
Yeah, I know that some guys have, because they were going through private doctors to get treatment, and so that they had done some things. I've heard guys talk about it. I don't have much in the way of specifics, but yeah, it's known. Dan Anderson, who's one of our guys, he went to a private doctor because he was having vision problems, and he ended up with, for lack of a better term, radiation burns. The radiation affected his cornea, I guess it was. It affected part of his eye. And he has a disease, and the only way you can get that disease is through exposure to radiation. And he's my age, bless his heart. He married a girl a little younger a few years ago. She didn't have any kids. They wanted to have kids, so they had a son. The son's 2 years old, and Dan says it could be within the next 5 years he'll be totally blind.
Man.
And his doctor, his civilian doctor, tested him and said the only reason this happens is because you're exposed to radiation. It's the only way you can have this problem.
Yep. Matter of fact, yes, I believe it was him who said several of you got that testing done, and he said all of them came back positive for plutonium.
Yep. Yeah. The things that they found on at Tonopah Test Range was, and maybe I went through this before, but it was plutonium-239, uranium-238, depleted uranium, beryllium. Then you get into all the other chemicals, and from conventional chemical weapons that were exploded out there, spent rocket fuel that's out there, spent remains from ordnances, and then they get into all these different things that were out there, and they say, yeah, well, either we burned them in open pits or we just buried it and left it there. And then on our site, we had an open burn pit and we had an open incinerator, and never once was anybody supplied PPE.
Yeah.
There was something that the mechanics used to have to use. And in 91, there was a briefing that told them, hey, you guys need to use PPE when you work with this stuff because it's really hazardous. And one of the guys that was in there was a staff sergeant, I'm told, that was given this briefing. And one of the guys that had been up there for a long time, that was a mechanic, aircraft mechanic, says, what about us that started using this here in 1983? And the staff sergeant looked at him and said, someday the Air Force will pay for that. One of the guys from this ended up with his hands peeling. I think he told me he had this stuff on him, and to clean it up, he sprayed 409 on his hands, and the 409 hardened it. And he had to go to the docks and get his hands taken care of, and his hands peeled for 3 to 4 years from this stuff. And I know what's in the compound, and it's all bad. And then they used to burn it, which then created the smoke had arsenic in it from this compound. And we would have to guard it because it was top secret material. When it would be burned, nobody had a rebreather or respirator or nothing. They just did it. And I talked to one of the commanders, the maintenance commanders, who was responsible for assigning troops to work that incinerator. And he's pretty distraught because he understands now what he was sending those guys out there to do.
It's
even our own commander. I talked to him and he feels guilty. He's like, I hired you guys. Well, he didn't know.
Right. He didn't know either.
And he's had cancer twice.
Man.
He swears it's not from being up there. Okay. But come on now.
Yeah. I think he just doesn't want
Suffering
to
from the
admit it.
same things
I
everybody
think he
else did.
knows, he just doesn't want to admit it.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Yeah.
He's a good man, and he was good. He was a good commander. He was good to all of us, and we all have huge respect for him. But we've some of the people that have called me, and I'm not here to out anybody, but it's pretty high ranking people that know what has taken place that have called me now.
Mhm.
And the guy who ran the air war in Kosovo, General Short, Lieutenant General,
Mhm.
he was a wing commander for us up there. He died of gastrointestinal stromal tumors in his stomach, and it's because of being up there.
Oh yeah, it is.
So it's really something, but the government needs to admit to it. They need to, not trying to be sarcastic and say they need to come clean, but they need to allow people to be recognized for what it is. And for, like, one of my supervisors died in 88. We've had a lot of guys that have died from sudden heart attacks, dropped dead from a heart attack with no known cause, even after autopsy, no known cause that made them have a heart attack. And healthy guys, one lady, so she got no benefit, even though we know it's service connected, but since they deny it, she's got no benefit. She died with two sons, a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, and she got no benefit from the government. And she's subject. What is it? DIC is the acronym. Dependent and something care. That's out there for somebody if they die of a service-connected illness.
Mhm.
If the veteran dies from a service-connected issue, that there's benefits out there for the surviving spouse.
Right.
And all of them have been denied benefits. All the kids have been denied benefits. There's educational opportunities for kids, and all of them have been denied those benefits.
Yeah, we made sure that was in the PACT Act to make sure that spouses and children were taken care of when the veteran died. So, and y'all should be getting the same benefits. Period. There should get no less. It's astonishing to me that the government states, well, veterans are taken care of when they come home, and we have to prove that we're not. And here you are, and they're still denying it. It pisses me off, is what it does.
Yeah. Well,
and
I fully intend we're going to get this.
Yes.
The comments back on the draft, and I'm hoping in the next 2-3 months that Congressman Amadei is going to have the opportunity to go in and introduce it. And our board and everybody that we can get is going to go to DC and hold a press conference on the Capitol steps. We're already working on that with congressional staff to allow us the opportunity to do that. And we're going to call them out.
Yeah, that's right. We will win.
Because I'm going to stand there and say, come fight me.
That's right.
You made me sick. You made my kids sick. You made my wife sick. Fight me.
That's right. Now, we're kind of out of time, so I want to show this slide of your group here. This is the group. Unfortunately, I do not have a slide for your website, but it will be in the description when I post this on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all them. And then
it's theinvisiblenemy.org.
All right.
The website is supposed to be up by the 14th of this month. I just talked to our public affairs and techie people that do that stuff today a couple of times. It'll be up. We're going to be raising money because, as you know, the fight's not cheap.
That's right.
We're spread out all over the country. And my hope is that obviously we're going to win this one. They can't.
That's right.
They can't say I'm wrong because they got to answer for their own documents. and then we're going to go help. We're going to go help others, and make a difference. And if I had told you this is what I was going to be doing 3 months ago, I wasn't even in my mind to think that this is where life was going to go. We did that press release. We got the coverage from that press release last night, and we've got like 400 million exposures on that press release in 50 countries. I've gotten calls from Thailand to England about it, from guys, from expats or guys stationed overseas that are contractors or whatever. And the news shows, and once we have the bill, I think it's going to be nuts. It's going to be, it'll be big news.
Oh yes, it will be.
Because everybody likes the saucy stuff, the sensationalism of, it's the range and it's Area 51 and
Right.
it's all this stuff.
Yes.
It's got that. It's got Joe Rogan written all over it.
Mm-hmm.
But people need to know.
Yes, they do.
Because they don't know. When you and I have been on calls with senators and congressmen staffs, and nobody has sat there and go, yeah, I heard.
No.
Nope. Nobody can believe it.
It's just,
it is. Hashtag we will win.
That's right. Now, what I do at the end of every show, I'm not sure if you're aware of or not about my brother Dennis, who was a Vietnam and Gulf War veteran. He decided to take his own life 22 years ago this past Christmas Eve. January 17th of this year, on my birthday, the VA finally came out with a program that I've been fighting for decades, to where any veteran can go to any medical facility in this country and say, hey, I feel like I'm going to hurt myself or I'm going to hurt somebody else. And the VA, regardless if they're in the VA system or not, will get free health care at that facility. Just by doing that, they will get mental health care. And also, it took us quite a while, but they finally did this maybe about a year ago. They finally made it easier for you to call the Veterans Crisis Line. It's no longer the 1-800 number. It's now 988. Then press 1. You will get a live human being on the other side. You will not get a tape recording. You will not get a message. You will not be placed on hold. Somebody will answer that phone and they will help you. All right. Also, they now have what's called vet centers throughout the country. If you do not feel comfortable enough going to the VA hospital to talk to a counselor or anything on mental health issues, you can go to vet centers, just walk in. Your family can even walk in, as long as it's a military issue that they walk in to get counseling for. They can go in and get free mental health counseling as well. Now, as many people know too, this show used to be called the Gulf War Advocate, but people were starting to call me that. Plus, we were only getting Gulf War veterans listening, and this show is for all veterans and their families. So we changed it to Veteran Central, and we are being presented by Veterans Assurance Network. So the good folks at Veterans Assurance Network, you can call them, or actually you can email them at support@veteransassurance.org. That's veteransassurance.org is also the website. If you are looking for a specific type of aid or benefit and you don't know who to go to for that, these are the people to contact. They will go with some simple questions they'll ask you. They will find out what nonprofit organization out there can help you. If they can't find any, they will help you themselves. One of the things that I learned while advocating for the PACT Act is there are some very good nonprofits out there that nobody knows about. They're doing some excellent work helping veterans deal with PTSD, traumatic brain injury, toxic exposure treatments, to financial aid, help you get if you have a less than honorable or a dishonorable discharge. People are out there to help you at least try to get an upgrade to your discharge. There are people out there assigned to make sure that your children get free education, college education, um, all kinds of things. So if you're unsure of who to turn to help you find this type of aid, go to Veterans Insurance Network. They're already building up a network of various nonprofits to help you out even more. Now, enough on that. And Dave, I want to thank you, sir, for coming on to the show tonight. And
Well, thank you.
oh,
And thanks
my
for
honor,
everything you're
man.
doing to help us
Oh,
too.
not a. That's what I'm here for now. That's my calling. It's. I don't think you know this. The day I found out after 25 years that my claim was finally approved with the VA, I started crying like crazy. And my wife took one look at me and she says, "Is it yes or no?" I told her it's yes. And she says, "I know your fight's not over." Very next day, that's when Bird Pinch 360 called me. But then my wife and I decided, yeah, whoever, whatever veteran or family member of a veteran needs help, we're going to be there for them. We're going to fight for them tooth and nail. They just got to give me, a little synopsis of what the problem is. You've done a lot more than that. And yeah, this is a fight that can't go unnoticed. So people, everyone out there, if you're not associated with this group, we're going to ask you to start calling your elected officials and say, "Hey, these Air Force veterans need help. You better give it to them." If you don't know how to call your congressman or your senators, everybody has 2 senators, everybody has 1 congressman. If you don't know how to locate them, Google it. Also, while you're at it too, before you call them, look up their voting history. See how they stand on veterans issues. The ones that seem to not vote for veterans issues, call them more. Call them often. Call them twice a day if you have to. Email them if you're one of their constituents. Because the only way you can email them anymore is if you are a constituent, and you have to prove that through typing in your zip code. Then it'll proceed to allow you to email them. But yeah, we need everybody behind this. This affects everybody in this country. So if you really want to thank a vet, this is how you do it. Call your elected officials, say, "Hey, these Air Force veterans that were stationed out there in Nevada, they need health care, and they need health care now." All right. Once again, Dave, my brother, I appreciate you, sir, and we will win.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And
have a great night, brother.
You too. And everyone, I'll be posting this on YouTube and everything here in a little bit. In the description, we'll have their website on there. We'll have other information so you can help them. And hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.